I really struggled with kind of owning my own worth, and it created a lot of stress for me and a lot of problems with like self-esteem and just a feeling of peace within. And even though I had a lot of success on the outside, and I don't know that a lot of people would have known, and I feel like that's true for a lot of women, like on the outside we look like we have it all together, but on the inside we sometimes feel like we're drowning.
Hello and welcome to my podcast Renew Motherhood. And this episode is Motherhood Without Guilt, Be Kind and Let Go of Perfect. For this topic, I have got a wonderful guest, Jennifer Erwin. Please briefly introduce yourself. Who are you? Where are you from? What makes this topic to you?
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm so glad to be here. My name's Jennifer Erwin, and I am a women's empowerment coach. I work with women, mostly moms, just really helping so many of us feel this internal stress and pressure to be everything to everyone, and we often forget ourselves and don't put ourselves on the list. And so I help women work through those thoughts and feelings and, all this stuff that comes with being a mom and being a woman in our world today, so that we can live our best lives and thrive both for ourselves and for our children. And I live in Colorado in the United States. It is finally getting cold here. We'll have a cold Halloween, which is pretty typical. And I really came to this work after being really hard on myself for lots of years. So I have a lot of perfectionist tendencies. I have a lot of people pleaser tendencies. I talk about them as kind of different parts of myself, but I really struggled with kind of owning my own worth, and it created a lot of stress for me and a lot of problems with like self-esteem and just a feeling of peace within. And even though I had a lot of success on the outside, and I don't know that a lot of people would have known, and I feel like that's true for a lot of women, like on the outside we look like we have it all together, but on the inside we sometimes feel like we're drowning. And so while I still feel that way sometimes, I've learned a lot of tools along the way through coaching and lots of personal growth work of how to make my relationship with myself much better and stronger, and it has rippled out and made everything, including my relationship with my son and my partner and my friends, so much healthier and calmer.
That's so great. And I think a lot of women can relate to this because sometimes it feels a little typical women.
Yes, very.
So seems to be in our blood. But yes, what was your biggest aha moment when you realized perfectionism was holding you back in motherhood? Is there something that you can share, that you can think about?
Yeah. I don't know if there was like one moment that I can think of right now, but I can think of so many tiny moments that I still experience where I keep realizing my own ideas and expectations that I have to be perfect are holding me back. And I can think of one right now that's relevant, that my son is getting to an age where he's getting more independent. He's 9. He wants to like do things on his own. He's not a baby anymore. Which of course brings up so much for us as moms, letting go. Everyone has their own stage that they love, right? And struggle with. And I feel like I'm a former teacher, and I worked with kids from ages 6 to 9. And I feel like I'm just like moving into this sphere that I have less maybe experience and confidence with. And he's really like becoming his own person. And I've noticed inside of myself around his own appearance and my fears of how that reflects on me as a parent. Because as moms, especially, we get judged for how our kids show up in the world. Like that's often the reality, whether right or wrong. And so how he looks, I've just been noticing that he likes his hair long. That's been his style. But he has this thick, beautiful hair that's really hard to wash. I know because I've tried to wash it. And he really wants to wash it by himself, which is a really big value of mine, to have him be independent. But oftentimes it's still not as clean as I would want it to be. And so it's like even my own perfectionism of like how people see me as a parent and me watching how that affects him, and then the tension between us of like how can I make his hair cleaner And how can I also just let him be himself and like figure things out on his own as he's growing and developing? And so I continually notice just where am I bumping up against society's expectations that we show up and be the perfect parent, which means our kids look perfect or act perfectly or behave perfectly. And where can I let that go and live into a more value-aligned life and let go of those expectations within? Because I don't have to internalize those. I don't have to live up to a perfect thing, and nor would I want to. It's not even, when I really examine perfection, it's not even something that I want, because I'm an imperfect being, and my child is an imperfect being, and my partner and my friends. And so it's really important that I don't model perfection, because they need to see, our children need to see what it's like to be an imperfect person dealing with an imperfect world. Like, we need to model that. And so if we're having these high expectations, it causes us a lot of grief, and it's just impossible to meet. And we're then missing the beautiful lessons that could come from showing up as an imperfect person.
And absolutely agree, because if you try to be this perfect woman, this perfect mother, and just want to have your son in a perfect, shiny situation, in a perfect, look, appearance, it's a pressure on him too, right?
Yeah.
So he needs to be perfect, and it's his thought probably then to be perfect for mom, for the world, but we don't want our kids to be this perfect people. And to raise in confidence means to accept yourself, right?
Yes.
So, and not to look on the outside, okay, what's expected from me? What do I have to do to please anyone else instead of me? So how can moms shift from perfectionism to self-compassion without feeling like they are giving up or being a great mom?
Oh, that is such a big question and so hard. And I want to address that those are the fears that I've looked at, that research has looked at, that when I think we have a belief, and I know this is true for me, that like if we strive for perfection, then maybe we're doing our best. Like we're aiming for something important, that we're like trying our hardest and we're not giving up or letting go of expectations or whatever. I think that's why we have often many of us have a harsh inner critic. It's like trying to help us grow into the best version of ourselves. It's just doing it in this really kind of cruel, critical way. And we're afraid that if we let that go, if we're kind to ourselves, that we're going to let ourselves off the hook. And we're not going to like make breakfast for our kids, or we're not going to show up in the ways, we're not going to exercise. We're like worried that like it's going to make us sit on the couch and watch Netflix and eat cereal all day. Like we have these deep-seated fears that by being kind to ourselves and even letting go of the idea of striving for perfection, that we're going to like collapse and fall apart, and like what would motivate us. And so like I think I just want to name that that's a common fear. And I think, again, even towards the fear, the self-compassion is the antidote. And self-compassion, I think we associate it with like sometimes having a pity party, or, like being like with kids, you can be like too flexible, where you're like, sure, and just let your kids run over. Yeah, you want to eat junk food all day? Sure, go for it, And we don't do that, right? That's not true love to us. We don't want to be so critical with them the way that we are with ourselves. Like we know that doesn't work as a parent, right? If we were like, you're horrible, you're terrible, all of those things, like we would never say the things that we say in our own heads to our kids. We know that wouldn't work. They would collapse, We want to have this good balance of, firmness and holding boundaries with like a calm, respectful air, doing what's best because we know we have more developed brains than our kids do. And holding that like kind, affirming space so that they can keep growing and learning from their mistakes, holding their big emotions, all of those things. And to me, that's what self-compassion really is showing up for ourselves like a good parent would. So it's not letting ourselves off the hook. It's just giving ourselves understanding that life is hard sometimes because we're human and we're going to have hard experiences. And how can we nurture ourselves and keep ourselves moving forward in that space. And so it is a big leap, because what's interesting is that, and what I found, it's kind of an ironic leap why it's so hard for us, because we often do that. Most of the women I work with are amazing at showing up this way for their friends and their partners and their colleagues or their patients or their children. And yet, so they have the skills. I'm always like, you've got mad skills in this area. It's just about turning it inwards, about like relating to yourself in the same way. And so really turning towards ourselves with care and like understanding like, I am human. This is normal. Nothing's wrong with me. Like anytime I feel frustrated with my son, I notice that I have to give myself some self-compassion, because I instantly have a judgment that someone who was a good mother wouldn't be frustrated in this situation. They would be grateful. They'd be appreciative. And the truth is that all moms get frustrated with their kids sometimes. Like that's the truth. Like I have not, tell me, maybe someone out there never gets frustrated, but I don't know that I would even want that, because it's just a normal human emotion. And anytime I model frustration and handling it in an appropriate way with my son, he knows that it's safe to experience frustration inside himself. He sees that, and he sees that it's okay, that he's not going to lose connection when someone's frustrated with him. Like if I'm showing up and not fighting my frustration, not shaming myself for the frustration, but I'm being kind and being like, oh, this is a hard moment. Frustration is a hard feeling. What a human emotion that is. All moms, all people feel frustration at different times. Is there something I need in this moment? Do I need to take 3 deep breaths? Do I need to walk away? Do I need to go get a drink of water? That's kind for me and kind for my son. And then I'm modeling for him, okay, it's okay to have frustration. That's human. Here's how you can deal with it. And I'm not losing connection with him or with myself. And so he knows that's a safe emotion that's okay in relationships to have. And so to me, that's the essence of, if we can get into the practice of giving ourselves self-compassion, which isn't letting us off the hook. It's not saying like, well, then I just have a free-for-all to like treat my kids however I feel and let my emotions run ramshod. Like that's not kind to yourself, because it doesn't feel good, and it's not kind to your kids. Like that's not what self-compassion says. Self-compassion is really just about acknowledging I'm human. It's okay to be human. What's a kind thing to do here? And usually the kindest thing for ourselves is often what's kindest for other people too.
So you would say that, well, personal practice self-compassion on those bad mom days would be really to pause, to take a break, to realize the moment. Or is there anything else that you like to share, what you're doing for yourself?
Yeah. So that's like a good practice in the moment, right? The kind of founder of self-compassion, one of the women who's kind of at the forefront of it is Dr. Kristen Neff. And she's written lots of books, but she calls it the self-compassion break, where you stop and you acknowledge and go through those steps of like, what's happening right now? Can I name it? Bring some mindfulness to it. It can be fast too. Be like, oh, this is frustration. What does that feel like? Oh, that's so human, like remembering your common humanity, and then bringing some kindness to the situation. And I find that that's helpful in all sorts of situations. So that's good for those tense mom moments. I often find that the more I can practice checking in with myself throughout the day, even when I'm not, and maybe even where I might not even be thinking, oh, I need some kindness here. It's just like, let me just pause in the middle of the day and kind of check in. What's going on? So I think the more self-connected we can be, which is a hard ask in our very busy world where lots of people are pulling on us. But I feel like even if it's just 30 seconds, 5 minutes, we often feel like we don't have that time, but I know we do, because we're berating ourselves. We get lost in our own negative thinking so often, and it takes up time and energy. So I feel like this is time well spent, even if you carve out 5 minutes to just be like, what do I need in this moment? Even just that simple question of like, what do I need? Can I give myself 1% of that? Like, because what might come up is you're like, I need a vacation by myself. And that's not doable right in that moment, usually ever. But you're like, okay, what's 1% of that? Like, what's underneath that? That's like maybe some alone time. Can I put myself in the bathroom, with a cup of tea. So, and like let everyone know that like I'm not available for the next 5 minutes, and like, or sit out in the sun or whatever it is. Put your feet up. Be like, hey, I'm resting for these 5 minutes. And so I feel like it's partly where I've made self-care. I've stepped out of perfectionism in self-care, because I feel like that can come up too, where we're like, I need to do self-care perfectly. And I have to do all these things. I have to exercise every day and meditate and whatever. We can turn it towards whatever. And I found that along with self-compassion,
we can cheat ourselves.
I know, exactly, of the things that are actually doable. Right? We tell ourselves it's impossible to reach this thing, and so we can't do it, or we end up failing because who has time to, go to a spa every week, or the finances or whatever. We just need to figure out what are those kind of drops of self-care that we can put in the day, and we have to prioritize it. And that's where I feel like our thinking can really, that's where I work with a lot of women, because we often have a lot of blocks of like, even I don't deserve 5 minutes, and so looking at, or someone else needs me more than I need myself in those 5 minutes. And sometimes that's true. Like if your baby's screaming, it's really hard to take care of yourself in those moments, but we could still find time later, or we can ask for more support or more help. So we have a lot of blocks that keep us from moving into that space. But I found that the tinier you can start and the more consistent you can do it, the more it's just transformational, rather than making it like I have to meditate for an hour. Can you meditate for 2 minutes, or breathe for 2 minutes, or put your feet up for 2 minutes, or enjoy your coffee undisturbed.
Right.
Can you ask your partner or whatever? How do you do that? How do you carve out that time?
Well, actually, sometimes I think it's difficult to be reminded, because if you are busy and you're doing just one task after the other, and your kids are coming in and you manage this and you handle that. And so sometimes it's difficult to be reminded, hey, take a pause, take a break. How do you feel? What's your tip on this? How can you be reminded?
How can you be reminded? It's true. And I feel like our brains give up a lot of, resistance and sometimes resentment. Like, oh, you don't understand. My life is so busy. There's so many things coming at me. And I totally understand that. I feel like we can all step into that mindset that I don't have time, and that like life isn't giving me this, or, and to me, that can be a very comfortable place to be in, because connecting with ourselves sometimes means that we're going to have to look at the uncomfortable things that are going on that we've been kind of pushing down because we haven't had time to deal with it or whatever. So I think that, again,
problem don't come now.
Exactly. Like, I can't feel this emotion now. I can't deal with this now. Like, and sometimes that is a useful strategy. It's just it's only a temporary block, like sometimes it's what we need to get through a hard day or whatever. But if we don't have those practices and rituals and routines that help us kind of like I think of it like as a filling ship. Like, our ship is going to sink if we don't kind of like let off some of the water that we're taking on board. And so we have to kind of, or release the air pressure. We get so tense. And if you never relax, like, we need the ebb and flow. Like, that's just natural and what we need. And so my thought is that, like, that's where, again, self-compassion comes in, of like, oh, how human of me to not find it easy to take a break. How human of me to have these moments where I'm noticing that I'm actively resisting this, or I'm feeling resentful that someone tells me that it's a break. Like, why is that? Life is really hard in this moment. I'm really busy. Like, just acknowledging what is that moment of like, yeah, I'm really busy. Life is demanding a lot of me. I am not alone in this. Life is demanding a lot from everyone. Can I even give myself permission to notice and not even have to take a break? If you feel resentful of like, I can't take a break, maybe that's not the kindest thing to do, right? Maybe it's all you have to do is just say, gosh, it's really hard for me to take a break. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's the 1%. And that again,
That's acknowledgement, right?
It's acknowledging, yeah, exactly what's going on. And to me, that's the power of self-compassion, is like, you're not trying to make it different. You're just like putting a warm blanket around what is and just saying, hey, like, we all deserve care because it's hard to be a human. It's hard to be a mom. It is.
Yes.
And and I think the other thing too is to acknowledge ourselves, which we also have a lot of blocks around, that you probably are doing more than you're giving credit. Maybe sometimes we feel so busy and overtaxed because we're actually thinking the mindset of, I'm not doing enough and I have to do more and I have to cross everything off my list. Again, slipping into some of that perfectionism of like, sometimes when I reflect back on my clients or on myself on a busy week, and I'm like, gosh, I got a lot done. Like, look at this stuff. And it's like hard to remember and we're not taught as women to acknowledge our own successes, and it feels really uncomfortable. So naming that this practice too brings up a lot of stuff. But I'm like, wow, you have been kicking butt this week. Look at all the things you've done. And you like sat and read to your kids, and you showed up in their emotional meltdown, and you drove them to all these activities, and you showed up at work and had a difficult conversation. They're like, yeah, but I didn't do X, Y, and Z. And I'm like, wow, let's just pause and be like, wow, I'm already being the amazing mom that I can expect myself to be. And
yes,
even
right.
that is giving ourselves enough credit for like how we're showing up, because we don't usually.
So would you say that reflecting each day may help?
Yes. I mean,
to write down perhaps something, what have I done good at this day? Or yes, just look back and just write down what you think that was really good.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so much research that shows that, like, reflective journaling and just brings that self-awareness, because we just kind of move on through things. And so I know that I usually start with something neutral if you struggle with it, because sometimes we won't give ourselves credit for good things that anyone else would give ourselves credit for. We're like, well, that's just what I should do, or I'm going to do. It's not like, anything. So sometimes I just write down, like, what did I do this week or today? And like, just sometimes looking at it from a neutral point of view of like, okay, I like made sure my son got, I'm a homeschooling parent. So I'm like, we got to these 3 things. Here was a place where I felt frustrated and we moved to playfulness. Or here's a moment where I drank more water than I did yesterday, or whatever it is. I got and sat out in the sun. Like, name all the things. You can even put like, I brushed my teeth, I took a shower, I made up my bed, whatever it is. And it's hard because I don't want to equate that to like getting more done as your worth. And because we have that too, where we're like, oh, the more things I get done in a day, the more worthy I am. So you just noticing that paradox sometimes, but sometimes when we're just trying to acknowledge how much we are doing, it's important to kind of see it or have someone reflect it back to you. So if you have a good friend who you're like, oh, this is all the things that I'm dealing with, who can reflect back and say, hey, here's all the ways what I'm hearing is this is how you're showing up in an amazing way, or here's how I feel like you're doing way more than enough, and like all the ways you're showing up as an incredible person. So having someone outside of ourselves reflect that, like a coach or a therapist or a really good friend, is really helpful, and trying to start doing that for ourselves, which does, I think, writing it down really does make a difference, because once it's on paper, it feels different. It's outside of ourselves rather than in our own heads.
Yes, that's great. So I love this, really, to say, let's go on a neutral position, on a neutral mind state, and look from this perspective. What have I done? What have I accomplished? And not measuring the task. How many have I done? Okay, I'm worth it. I love this. This is great. Yes. So why do you think society glorifies perfect moms? How do we collectively push back against that narrative?
Oh, yeah, I think society for a long time has been glorifying perfection in women, because if we're distracted by trying to make ourselves perfect, then we're not doing the things that really lift us up. And sometimes I think it's been a system of oppression, of like, if we expect too much, which I believe perfection is, from a group of people, like it distracts them from actually staying connected to their own power. Because if we're looking externally to what other people expect of us and how we should look, and like chasing an impossible dream, which could be like making sure that we look perfect, that we show up perfectly. So that's one piece of it. And I also think it's like if we're so taught to invest in serving other people, then we're kind of denying that we have any worth outside of our capacity to birth children or serve the needs of others or anything like that. And I really believe as women that we have a right to be here as ourselves. And that when we do that, we actually serve people better. So it doesn't actually serve everyone to believe in this kind of belief that we have to be perfect, that we have to fit into these idyllic standards. And it usually serves someone else's purpose, whether it's just have us buy another parenting tool or to a product for our face or a way to lose weight or whatever it is that keeps us trapped in these other ideals. We are not then focused on what really matters to us.
I love this. Gets down to awareness, right? To become aware of what's going outside and what's going inside on. So, and to really to connect to yourself, to your inner being more than looking on the outside. What do others want from me? What do they expect? How do I fit into this society? How do I, go with the masses somehow?
Yeah.
So sometimes we have to step one step back to say, no, that's not me. And to take the courage, actually, right? It takes a lot of courage to say, I can't do this. It's not me.
Yeah. Yeah. And I feel like I want to name too that it feels scary because of biology, that not only a socialization that we've been taught to please others, and so it feels unsafe. We're worried we won't have the people supporting us or, you know, the resources that we need. Like we have this kind of deep-seated social fear that if I don't please others, I'm going to be alone. And then that's rooted in biology, like in evolution, we're tribal creatures and social creatures. And that if we were not agreeable in a tribe, if we were always causing trouble or whatever, there was a very real fear of like, if I'm not cooperating and working within a group and belonging in this group, I could not survive. Like I might get kicked out of this tribe and I'm not going to survive. We're talking way, way, way back, but our brains are still there. And so again, another place to bring ourselves kindness and care and compassion of like, oh yeah, of course I feel this anxiety about wanting to please others. That's how my brain was built. Like it makes sense based on what happened in the past. But the truth is that we live in this amazing world right now that's so interconnected. And I can almost 100% guarantee you that if you really connect with your authentic self, that you're going to find groups of people that are going to resonate with that, because people actually also really resonate with authenticity. And so by connecting to ourselves and owning our own needs and being in this secure, confident place and knowing that we're not going to abandon ourselves, that we can't ever get kicked out of the tribe of one internally, which is often what we do when we're harsh with ourselves, that creates a sense of connection with others. It just goes that way. It's one of those things that what we fear most, if we were to do this thing that feels really scary, which is kind of beat to the rhythm of our own drum, people find like, I like that rhythm, and they want to come in and collaborate and join with you and make music with you. And so it's hard to trust into that when we have a lot of old programming, both from our culture and from our evolutionary past. But the truth is, what I found is that if we can just let that fear be there and do the connection and do the self-compassion and do the practices where we're like tuning into who we are and look for people in our world that like appreciate that. You can look on the internet. There are so many people out there. There are so many tribes of people that really value that and care about it. And so we don't have to believe those beliefs anymore. The people that we resonate with are out there.
Yeah, this is so amazing. I love this really, because that's it. That's the beauty of being connected worldwide and to be able to look for people because of our technique that we have, because of everything that is provided for us. So we don't have to stay in these old traditions anymore. We can step out of this and embrace the new. And it's so encouraging. Your words are so so empowering. So I think it's wonderful. What would you say is the first thing a mom should say to herself in the morning to set a tone of self-compassion for the day?
Yeah, I would recommend people play around with what works for them, because everyone, especially with language, you have to kind of find the right rhythm. I know on the days that I wake up with a lot of self-compassion, I wake up and I'm often tired or my alarm went off and I'm not quite ready, and I say, "Oh, hello, darling." I just open with a term of greeting, or "Oh, hey there." How would I want to wake up my children of "Hello, sweetheart. The day is here. You're eager to connect with this person." So thinking of if one of your favorite people walked into the room, how would you want to greet them? And so I feel just that, to me, it starts with connection, not always with an affirmation of I'm great today or whatever it is. But really, how do you wake up and start that connection from the get-go, that loving, tender connection where I'm "You're tired, sweetheart." That kind of language for me works. That may turn someone else off. And so I encourage you don't have to take my practice, but find what works. What is it that you would want? If
Yes.
your favorite person in the world came and woke you up, what would you want to hear first thing in the morning? And then give that to yourself of and it could just be the sweetest tone of "Good morning." It doesn't even have to have much. It's just really, how are you relating to yourself? And I feel that starts my day off in a much better foot. I get out on the right side of the bed when I can remember. And to me, it's a practice. And, there's so many things that you can do to kind of get yourself into that place. But even if it's just a nugget of what would I want someone to say to me in the morning? Again, that curiosity of and then play around with it and see what works, what helps you get out of bed without that kind of, I think of our inner critics as kind of shoving us out of the bed. And I feel our inner wisdom, the part of us that knows best, that's that, kind and firm parent, gives us a hug and says, "Oh, good morning. Are you ready for the day?" And if you're not, to be "Yeah, of course, the bed is warm. You have a lot to do. But I'm going to be here with you while we figure it out." Just that warmth and care and connection, I feel is the biggest thing to start your day
That's so wonderful. I love this. So for the audience, just imagine yourself tomorrow morning waking up just as another person, to connect to yourself first and say, okay, the kindest words, what would you love to hear here? This is so wonderful. I think this is so valuable, really, to really set the tone for the day. And we're joking here a little, but there is a science behind this. And it makes another day for you. And if you don't believe it, just try it out and look what happens. I always love to try things out. So experience this for yourself. I think this is always the best proof. And I think we can talk forever here, but time runs out.
I know. This is why, again, I think this is one of those great examples of here we are. You're over in Germany, I'm over in the United States, and we're having this beautiful connection. And so your people are out there. I just feel there's so many possibilities in this wildly interconnected world. You don't have to be alone. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what would you say, the last question, to the mom who is listening right now and feels she'll never be enough, no matter how hard she tries?
Yeah. Well, first of all, put my hand on my heart, because I send so much care and compassion and understanding, because I've been there before. And so, again, being you're not alone in that thought. And just because you have that thought doesn't make it true. Our thoughts are just electrical wirings. It's understandable you have that thought. And it makes sense why you have that thought, and you are not alone in that thought. millions of moms around the world often have that thought, and that does not make it true. And I would argue that just the opposite, that you are already more than enough. And by embracing that belief or having other people champion it for you until you are able to lean more into it, is possible. It's possible for someone else to hold that capacity, that belief that you are enough until you can believe it for yourself. And to surround yourself with people that already believe that, and then start taking those actions that can be like, well, if I was more than enough, what if I just was enough? What would I do or say or think or believe? And start from that place, because I guarantee you it doesn't serve anyone to believe that thought.
Yes, so true. So, and if you don't have anyone to really remind you, I would suggest to reach out to Jennifer. Where can people find you, Jennifer?
Yes, I love this. Again, this is where I had people that were champion me and have helped me and supported me. And that's partly why I do this work, is because I just want to give back and serve. So if you just need that reminder that you're enough, or someone else to hold it for you until you're able to hold that belief yourself, you can reach out to me for a free call or learn more about my work through my website, jennifererwincoaching.com. I am always delighted to hear from people.
Wonderful. So I will place this in the description that people can find you and reach out to you. And yes, thank you so much for this valuable session that we had. And I really loved it, because self-compassion is a crucial thing nowadays, I think. We are more and more distracted from the outside, from social media, from expectations from the outside. Everything is changing. And if we have to change, then let's change for the good, and let's connect to ourselves again.
I love that.
Thank you so much.
I have so enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for having me on.
Yes, and to all the listeners, please subscribe this channel, and yes, stay tuned.